Hello everyone, it's Karen at the Cool Tools Studio. I'm here today with a beginner project that uses just 2 grams of clay. So it's a great project if you just have a little bit of clay left in your pack and don't know what to do with it. This is a great beginner project because it doesn't use many tools. You need a work surface, a snake maker, a palette knife, a brush for water, and then something to mix up paste. I like these clay shapers. This one's a extra firm cup round clay shaper. You also need some sort of little tough card or something to move your piece off to dry. And then a dish with some water, sanding pads, and today I'm using the EZ925 Sterling Clay. And then for these pieces, I like to work with a slightly larger stone, so this is a great project for those larger stones that you may have sitting around and you're not sure just what to do with. Cool Tools sells a very wide variety of both colors and shapes of stones that can be fired up to 1550 for 1 hour, which is how long this clay needs to sinter. I like to add these little elements to my pieces made from Finishing Touches molds, and they have such a huge variety of shapes, but for this project I kind of thought it'd be cute to work with leaves, and then I made one with a bee, but they also have some pretty butterflies and snowflakes, and there's just lots of opportunities for you to pick a different finishing touches and make this piece your own. I'm working with EZ925 Sterling Clay today, and I selected that because this piece has some delicate coils and there isn't really a bunch of body and structure to these pieces, so the extra strength of the sterling is an excellent choice. And Sterling 925 is a little bit different from other clays. If you're used to working with EZ960 or FS999, it comes out of the package a little bit firmer and does require conditioning. So once I pull it out, it might feel a little bit stiff initially, but just some gentle kneading, either with your fingers or rolling it with a roller, is going to very quickly soften it up. And you can kind of tell when you pull it and the way that it's flattening really thinly, really easily, that it's ready to go. So I actually like to start this project by making my elements, and because this clay is a little bit stickier, it doesn't go into the finishing touches as readily as our softer clays. So what I'll do is I always push down, and then it kind of wants to stick to itself on the way out. So instead of just dragging across start to finish, if I were to do that, I'll show you what happens. It kind of peels a little bit. Well, that one actually stayed in pretty nicely. Sometimes they'll peel out. And if that's happening to you, then what I like to do with this clay is I'll press in and kind of halfway pull and halfway pull. And it does leave a little bit of residue on the top surface here, and for that I'll just take some water and plop it on, and then use my palette knife to clean that up, and then I'll take that moisture aside and I'll put it into a little jar or container and use that for making slip for other projects. To get these elements out nicely, you need to dry them on heat, so I'm going to take this piece off to the hot plate to dry so that I can pull my leaf elements out. Before I do that, I'm just going to make a couple more for this project. So like any other clay, when I'm making a snake, I kind of start it as a cylinder and set it on my work surface and just apply some downward pressure when going back and forth, back and forth. And how thick or thin you want to make your coil is kind of a personal choice. Maybe it depends on how big your stone is. You don't want to have a small stone and like a really thick coil wrapped around it. You kind of want the coil to complement your stone. So for a piece with a slightly larger stone like I'm going to be doing today, I'm just kind of coiling it and tapering the end of it. But I'm not using any thickness frames or anything to make it a specific thickness. I'm just kind of looking at it and checking to see how I think it's gonna look. I think that might be a bit thick yet on the end there, so I'm flipping it and focusing some pressure on pulling my coil this way to thin it out. And this clay has a really long working time for the coils. They don't dry out and crack on you, which can be frustrating. But you're going to take your stone, and you kind of want to do a little bit of planning and consider, okay, if the stone was shaken left to right or up and down, how am I going to make sure that it's secured? So I just kind of will set my coil down and wrap And as I'm doing that, I'll kind of think, okay, well, I need to make sure I'm coming around both sides. So I'm kind of making sure I go around the bottom there all the way. And then I'm coming up the side here on the back, and you need to make something for this to hang by, right? So I'm just kind of pushing up. And then I'm applying some pressure back here to bring my bail forward a little bit. And I'm going to attach an element there, and that's going to secure it so the stone can't fall up and out once it's fired. And then at this point, maybe you want to do some more wrapping, maybe you want it to end here. I'm going to choose to end mine there, so I'm taking my palette knife from before, and I'm just going to remove some clay. You could use a scalpel, a tissue blade, anything really. And then I'm going to just kind of scoot it around a bit. And I'm just going to do a little bit of smoothing with a brush. I'm going to be using an element to hide this connection, but I'm just going to use a brush to kind of smooth it out a little bit to make my life easier once it's dried. And like I said before, this clay has a stickiness, so it kind of stuck to my stone as I was wrapping, and that made this project pretty easy to execute. But I'm going to put a little bit of water here and bring it up there. And then at this point, before I come and solidify any of my connections or add my elements, I want this clay to dry. That way, as I'm building up and stuff, I'm not pushing against things and moving them. So at this point, I'm going to put it on a tough card and kind of set it and situate it how I want it to be. And then I'm going to take this piece off to dry. Once your clay has dried, you're ready to kind of clean up any connection points and add the little decorative elements from the finishing touches. And I always kind of like to consider the back, and on this one, I can either smooth that out and sand it and make it look kind of seamless, or sometimes it's kind of nice to add a little decorative element on the back as well, like I did on this piece with the bee. So we'll see how we feel about that, but I always like to start with the front face. And I didn't say these earlier, but tweezers are optional for this project. I'm going to be using them today specifically so you guys can see, so I'm not blocking everything with my fingers. But when you're making connections with EZ925 Sterling, which I'm going to be doing to add my little leaf elements, they've dried and I just popped them out of my mold. You want to make your connections with paste. EZ925 kind of does this neat thing where it draws moisture into itself, which is great for reconditioning and keeping the clay moist while working. But for connections, just water will not be sufficient. So you want to make a paste or a slip, and to do that, this clay has really quick surface melt, so I just add a little bit of water, and I'm using a clay shaper to press it in. And I'm going to be using this to apply my finishing touches molded elements. I always kind of like to audition the elements and see where I like them. I always do one up top to kind of trap the stone in so it can't sneak its way out from the top if this wasn't over far enough. And then I usually like to kind of put one at the bottom for a little bit of balance. And I'm thinking maybe on this one it might be kind of fun to have it off of that vine there. And then I don't know if this one will be too big, but this is just kind of part of the creative process, and I think it's a really fun part of this project is picking out where things are going to go. And I think generally around there is going to look nice. So I'm going to start off by removing my elements and then applying the paste to them. And for that, I'm just going to kind of dip the back of my element into the paste there and then place it. Apply a little bit of pressure, and then I'm going to use a damp brush to clean up any slip that might be peeking out from the side there. I'm going to repeat that on the top. And this clay refines really easily wet, and it cleans up really nicely with a damp brush, so I'm not too worried about things being messy. I'll scoot it down just a bit and really quickly and easily clean up any overfill. When you end up getting smears like this on your CZ, it's actually easier to just let it dry and then use a clay pick or a toothpick or anything really to just really gently scrape the dried clay off. And I'll show that once this is dried. So I'm happy with how that looks. So now onto the back. You can see where I kind of chopped that. And I don't love the way that that looks. So I'm going to use yet another little element to disguise that. And I think that'll end up looking really cute. So I'm dragging it through the paste to pick some up. Again, applying just a little bit of pressure and cleaning up with a damp brush. At this time, I also like to kind of peek inside the loop there and make sure that connection is looking strong. And just to reinforce it, I'm going to pick up a little bit of paste and press it into that spot and smooth it out. I'm going to allow this to dry before doing just a itty bitty bit of cleanup, and then we'll be ready to fire. So my piece is dried, and I'm going to show you how quickly you can clean up the slip that got on the stone there. I'm not using the pointy edge, but instead the side of my pick, and I'm just kind of using it to scrape away the clay. Like anytime you go to fire a stone, I'm going to clean my stone prior to firing with alcohol on a little Q-tip or makeup applicator. But if I were to do that without cleaning up this silver first, it would just kind of smear around and make a bigger mess. So I'm just really quickly scraping away the larger spots of clay on my stone. And the rest of that we'll clean up with alcohol. For a project like this, there isn't too much cleanup depending on how well you placed your pieces and how much time you spent with the damp brush. But if you do feel like you need to do some refining, these sanding pads are an excellent option. Usually I'll start with superfine, but on something like this where there isn't really an edge to be cleaning up or anything, I'm just going to be using the ultrafine and microfine. And I'm just looking for areas that maybe aren't super smooth, or maybe have a blemish. Right here, there's a spot that maybe my paste kind of came out and could use some cleaning up. And I'm just super gently sanding them to clean them up. And any spot that you do refine, you'll want to follow up with microfine. I'm just kind of giving it a look over, seeing if there's any spots that need addressed. But for the most part, this project's pretty straightforward and there isn't too much sanding to do. You don't need to go over like the coiled surfaces or the molded surfaces. Those will polish up just fine. So whenever you're happy with how things look, you're ready to fire. EZ925 is an open shelf clay, and it doesn't need to be fired in carbon unless you're working with a stone that requires carbon. For a piece like this where it's not flat backed, I'd recommend using a dish with either alumina hydrate or vermiculite in it, and you're going to full ramp up to 1550 Fahrenheit and hold for 1 hour. For a piece like this, you could polish it using any methods, hand polishing or a radial tool. I just tumbled my pieces and it brought them up to a really nice shine really easily. I love how each time I make these pendants, they turn out a little bit different, and I can't wait to see how yours turn out too. Thanks for watching.